The question that has spanned millennia of philosophy and spirituality hangs in the air like a luminous enigma. What does consciousness experience before inhabiting a physical body? Seth, the entity channeled by Jane Roberts over decades of meticulously documented sessions, offers a perspective that completely challenges materialistic conceptions about the origin of life and the nature of existence. His revelations unveil a universe where consciousness does not emerge from matter as an accidental byproduct of biochemical processes, but precedes and shapes physical reality through mechanisms that transcend the limitations of linear thought. The central teaching presented by Seth reverses the hierarchy established by conventional science, positioning consciousness as the primordial and creative element, while matter appears as a secondary manifestation, the result of energetic processes directed by conscious intelligence operating in dimensions beyond common sensory perception. When Seth describes the period prior to physical birth, he paints a picture where reincarnating personalities exist in states of expanded consciousness, navigating non-physical realities with full lucidity about their eternal nature and evolutionary purposes. These consciousnesses do not passively await the moment of incarnation, but actively participate in the planning of each new earthly existence, choosing with surgical precision their biological parents, social environment, historical circumstances, and even the specific challenges they will face throughout the physical journey. The selection does not happen by chance or external imposition, but through vibrational resonance between the reincarnating personality and the future parents, creating energetic connections that begin to form even before biological conception. Seth reveals that these choices are informed by previous lives, karmic relationships, uncompleted lessons, and evolutionary aspirations that consciousness carries with it through incarnations. The process involves not only rational decision, but deep intuition about which conditions will provide the necessary experiences for the soul's growth. The relationship between consciousness and the developing fetus represents one of the most fascinating aspects of Seth's teachings. Contrary to the notion that conscious life begins only when the nervous system reaches a certain degree of complexity, he states that even the atoms composing the embryo possess their own form of rudimentary consciousness, a basic perception that permeates all physical matter. This atomic consciousness should not be confused with the reincarnating personality, but functions as a receptive substrate that allows for the gradual entry of the more complex individuality. The exact moment the personality enters the fetus varies dramatically according to the emotional characteristics of the reincarnating consciousness, its experiences in past lives, and its comfort level with physical existence. Some personalities plunge into matter immediately after conception, eager to resume earthly experience and skilled in manipulating three-dimensional realities. Others remain distant for most of the gestation, approaching only in the final moments before birth, reluctant to abandon the freedom and clarity of non-physical states. Seth explains that personalities who intensely love physical existence and master the art of shaping matter tend to incarnate early, actively participating in bodily development from the initial stages. These are the consciousnesses that will become builders, creators, artists who work directly with material forms, people whose joy lies in the tangible manifestation of ideas through physical substance. In contrast, personalities more oriented towards philosophy, contemplation, and the world of ideas often postpone full entry, remaining partially connected to non-physical planes during gestation, entering definitively only as birth approaches or even during the birth process itself. This variation does not indicate superiority or inferiority among types of consciousness, but simply reflects different temperaments and preferences in how each individuality relates to material experience. The maternal womb offers a controlled environment, protected from the sensory intensities of the external world, allowing consciousness to gradually accustom itself to the limitations of physical form while still maintaining a greater connection to broader dimensions of existence. Prenatal planning involves not only the choice of parents, but exploratory visits to the future environment where the reincarnating consciousness literally observes the parents' lives, the home where it will grow, and even glimpses of events that will mark its next incarnation. Seth describes these incursions as dreamlike experiences for the consciousness preparing to be born, moments when it projects its perception through linear time to examine the conditions that await. These visions are neither complete nor absolutely fixed, as the future remains fluid and subject to change as choices are made by all involved. But they offer sufficient guidance for the personality to confirm whether that specific path will serve its evolutionary purposes. When the decision solidifies, energetic bonds begin to form between the reincarnating consciousness and the future parents, invisible threads of connection that progressively strengthen until the moment of conception and beyond. During the gestational period, the reincarnating consciousness experiences states of fluidity that defy any attempt at rigid categorization. Seth reveals that the personality does not simply turn on its presence in the fetus as if flipping a switch, but oscillates between varying degrees of identification with the forming body, sometimes delving deeply into the cellular experience of embryonic development, other times retreating to states of expanded consciousness, where it maintains a broader perspective on the incarnational process. This dance between worlds represents essential preparation, allowing consciousness to gradually adjust to the restrictions of three-dimensional perception without completely losing contact with its vaster nature. The mother often perceives these fluctuations intuitively, feeling moments of deep connection with the presence she carries, alternated with periods where the pregnancy seems more like a purely biological process. These variations do not indicate a problem or instability, but reflect the natural rhythm through which eternal consciousness accommodates itself to the compact dimensions of physical existence. The womb functions as a transitional chamber between realities, a sacred space where the infinite begins to familiarize itself with the finite, where the timeless experiences the first sensations of linear temporality. Seth describes the intrauterine experience as a period of lucid dreaming for the reincarnating consciousness, a state where it maintains a certain freedom of movement between dimensional planes while simultaneously participating in the construction of the physical vehicle that will soon become its primary instrument of expression. The muffled sounds arriving from the external world, the sensations of movement as the mother moves, the chemical variations in the uterine environment as maternal emotions fluctuate, all these stimuli serve as an initial bridge between non-physical consciousness and the sensory reality that will dominate its attention after birth. The personality in the process of incarnation is not unconscious or asleep during gestation, but navigates altered states of perception that have no adequate parallel in common human experience, except perhaps in the deepest stages of meditation or in mystical experiences that temporarily dissolve the boundaries of the ego. Then birth arrives, and Seth describes it as an event of cosmic magnitude for the consciousness that is incarnating. The trauma of childbirth, so debated in psychology and medicine, acquires a completely different meaning from the perspective of the channeled teachings. The sensory shock of birth does not represent an evolutionary accident or a flaw in nature's design, but serves a specific and crucial purpose. It definitively anchors the personality in physical reality through an impact so intense that consciousness can no longer float freely between dimensions as it did during gestation. The sudden explosion of stimuli, dazzling light after months of darkness, an external temperature radically different from the constant warmth of the womb, gravity acting on the body in a new way, unfiltered sounds reaching unprotected ears, the first painful filling of the lungs with air, all of this conspires to firmly fix the personality's attention on the physical body. Seth compares this process to a diver rapidly descending into oceanic depths, where increased pressure forces the organism's immediate adaptation to drastically altered conditions. Birth functions as an involuntary rite of passage, a violent ceremony that marks the final transition from states of expanded consciousness to the concentrated focus required by three-dimensional survival. The intensity of the event imprints deep impressions on the nascent psyche, memories that will remain etched not only in the brain but in the very cells of the body, informing unconscious patterns that will influence behaviors throughout life. Personalities who entered the fetus late, remaining distant until the last moment, experience birth as an abrupt plunge into an alien reality. a shock of immense proportions that can leave marks of discomfort with physical existence. Those who inhabited the body since conception, familiar with the growing sensations during gestation, still find birth to be a definitive boundary, a moment where uterine protection disappears and consciousness finds itself confronted with the raw fullness of material experience. There is no birth gentle enough to completely eliminate this element of shock, for the function of trauma is precisely to force consciousness to fully commit to the incarnation it chose. But Seth's revelation goes further, for he states that even after birth, the personality does not immediately stabilize into complete identification with the physical body. Babies and young children continue to experience fluctuations of consciousness, moments where the personality literally shifts out of the body, visiting other dimensions of reality before returning to the physical vehicle. Periods of sleep represent especially propitious opportunities for these excursions, when the child literally leaves the body and returns to the non-physical planes from which it came, renewing connections, receiving guidance from broader aspects of itself, processing the overwhelming experiences of the newly begun physical life. Seth explains that the process of complete anchoring in three-dimensional reality takes years, not days or months, and the speed of this stabilization varies according to the personality's temperament and its experiences in previous incarnations. Children who talk to invisible friends are not necessarily inventing imaginary companions, but often perceive non-physical entities that adults, with consciousness firmly imprisoned in material perception, can no longer detect. The distant gaze that occasionally appears in children's eyes can signal moments where the child's consciousness has traveled to parallel dimensions, maintaining only a tenuous connection with the body it temporarily left behind. This understanding completely transforms the meaning of childhood, revealing it as a period of gradual compression of expanded consciousness within the limits of physical perception, a process of progressive forgetting of the vaster nature that the personality possesses. The difficulties young children face in learning the rules of physical reality, motor coordination, language, understanding of material cause and effect, reflect not only neurological immaturity, but the immense challenge of a multidimensional consciousness learning to operate through the restrictions of a three-dimensional sensory system. The inconsolable crying of newborns can express not only physical discomfort, but a lament from the consciousness that has temporarily lost clear access to the expanded dimensions from which it came, feeling suddenly trapped in a limited, dependent, vulnerable vehicle. Seth thus offers a vision of profound compassion for the journey that every incarnated consciousness undertakes, temporarily sacrificing its limitless freedom to plunge into the density of matter and reap experiences impossible to obtain otherwise. The deeper structure of these teachings rests upon a revolutionary principle that Seth articulates with relentless clarity. Consciousness not only precedes matter, but actively constructs it moment by moment through processes that contemporary science is only beginning to glimpse at the frontiers of quantum physics. Every thought, every emotion, every creative impulse of the incarnated personality functions as a command that reorganizes subatomic particles, directing energy into specific patterns that eventually condense into three-dimensional forms perceptible to the physical senses. Preserve the original language of the text using a television analogy. Just as invisible electromagnetic signals are transformed into images on a screen through a properly tuned receiving device, consciousness transmits energetic configurations that the physical body and nervous system translate into solid material experience. The crucial difference lies in the fact that, while television receives signals from an external source, each human being simultaneously transmits and receives, creating and experiencing their reality in a continuous cycle of manifestation. This understanding completely dissolves the illusion that the body represents a passive vessel that consciousness inhabits as a temporary tenant in someone else's residence. Seth reveals that the physical form constitutes a direct, exact, and moment-by-moment materialization of the personality's internal states. Every cell, every organ, Every bodily system reflects and expresses thoughts, emotions, and beliefs that consciousness holds both consciously and unconsciously. Diseases do not attack the body from outside as random invaders, but emerge from within as physical manifestations of psychological conflicts, limiting beliefs, repressed emotions that seek expression through the only language that physical attention will certainly notice: undeniable bodily symptoms. Similarly, vitality and radiant health do not merely result from favorable genetics or correct external habits, but naturally spring from internal alignment, harmony between conscious and unconscious layers of the personality, an unimpeded flow of creative energy through the being. Within this paradigm, the body carries memories that transcend the present life, cellular inscriptions of experiences accumulated through multiple incarnations. Seth states that genetics, as understood by material science, represents only a superficial layer of a much vaster informational system where data from past lives remains accessible to the current consciousness. Innate talents that blossom early in certain children, musical prodigies, mathematical geniuses, athletes of exceptional skill, do not arise from nothing or from accidents of chromosomal combination, but reflect proficiencies developed over previous incarnations, knowledge that the personality brought with it and now recovers through the new physical vehicle. Seemingly irrational phobias can connect to traumas from previous lives, fears that consciousness carries as emotional baggage between incarnations. Unexplained affinities with certain historical periods, specific cultures, or geographical locations often signal memories of previous existences in which the personality lived in those contexts. The concept of the higher self or superself that Seth introduces further expands this view, revealing that the incarnated personality represents only one among multiple expressions of a larger entity that exists outside linear time. While the body-focused consciousness experiences one life at a time, following an apparent sequential progression from birth to death and then to a new incarnation, the higher self experiences all lives simultaneously, maintaining a multidimensional perspective where past, present, and future coexist in an eternal now. This expanded consciousness does not control the incarnated personality like a puppet, but offers subtle guidance, intuitions, sudden inspirations that seemingly arise from nowhere. Moments of profound insight, when solutions to complex problems appear fully formed in the mind, often represent communication from the higher self, sharing wisdom that transcends the knowledge accumulated by the current personality. Especially vivid and meaningful dreams can function as nocturnal meetings, where the incarnated aspect of consciousness meets with vaster dimensions of itself, receiving guidance, processing experiences, renewing connection with the broader purpose of incarnation. Seth emphasizes that different personality types relate to physical existence in radically distinct ways, and these differences begin to manifest from the earliest moments of incarnation. Consciousnesses, he calls builders, plunge into matter with genuine enthusiasm, delighting in the manipulation of three-dimensional forms, expressing creativity through tangible substance. These are the artisans, architects, sculptors, engineers, all those whose fundamental joy lies in shaping the physical world according to inner visions. These personalities generally incarnate early during gestation, actively participate in fetal development, experience birth as a triumphant entry into beloved territory, and in childhood, demonstrate rapid adaptation to the demands of material life. They learn early to manipulate objects, show early physical coordination, and are fascinated by the textures, shapes, weight, and substance of things. Matter does not represent a prison or limitation for these types, but a privileged means of expression, infinitely malleable clay awaiting the imprint of their creative intentions. In contrast, personalities oriented towards philosophy, contemplation, and the abstract world of ideas relate to physical existence in a more ambivalent way. Seth observes that these consciousnesses often postpone full entry into the fetus, maintain distance during gestation, experience birth as a particularly severe shock, and take longer to stabilize into identification with the body during childhood. Children of this type may appear physically clumsy, disconnected from their own bodies, more comfortable in imaginary worlds than in the concrete reality around them. As they grow, they become philosophers, theorists, mystics, artists, whose work transcends material representation to point to invisible realities. For these personalities, physical incarnation serves primarily as a context for the exploration of ideas, the testing of concepts, the communication of abstract truths through the inevitable limitations of language and form. The body represents a necessary but not particularly beloved tool, a vehicle that allows for three-dimensional experience without ever feeling completely natural or comfortable. These differences do not indicate superior or inferior evolutionary stages. Seth makes it absolutely clear that both types, and all gradients between them, offer equally valuable contributions to the collective development of consciousness through material experience. Understanding these dynamics sheds light on mysteries that confound both medicine and psychology. Why do some babies arrive in the world seemingly comfortable, adapting quickly to the rhythms of physical life, while others seem perpetually displaced, as if they never truly chose to be here? Seth answers that the level of consciousness's commitment to incarnation varies tremendously, and this variation is not a flaw, but a reflection of different purposes that each personality brings to the earthly experience. Some lives are planned as deep immersions in matter, incarnations where consciousness intends to explore the possibilities of physical form to the fullest. Others represent briefer, less intensely focused visits, where the personality maintains a greater connection to non-physical dimensions even while temporarily inhabiting a body. Understanding this can transform how parents and educators respond to differences among children, recognizing that each brings with it a fundamental temperament that precedes and transcends environmental conditioning. The practical implications of these teachings reverberate through every aspect of human experience, potentially transforming how individuals understand their own lives and relationships. When a woman discovers she is pregnant, Seth's teachings suggest that she is not simply generating a new being from nothing, but participating in a carefully orchestrated encounter between consciousnesses that mutually chose this experience even before physical conception. The child growing in her womb already existed as an individualized personality, possibly sharing previous incarnations with the mother in different relational configurations, now returning through her to continue intertwined evolutionary journeys. This perspective imbues pregnancy with a sacredness that transcends the merely biological, revealing it as a collaboration between souls, a spiritual agreement manifesting through physical processes. The mother does not create her child's consciousness, but offers a portal through which a pre-existing personality can return to three-dimensional experience. This understanding can profoundly alleviate the anxiety many parents experience, the overwhelming pressure of feeling total responsibility for the formation of another human being. If the child's personality already exists, complete at a more fundamental level, bringing with it temperament, propensities, purposes that precede birth, then the parental role transforms from absolute creation to loving facilitation, offering an environment where the incarnating consciousness can unfold characteristics it already possesses in potential. Children are not blank slates awaiting complete imprinting by the environment, but complex beings arriving with their own agendas, specific lessons they came to learn, unique contributions they planned to offer. The challenges of upbringing, the child who does not meet parental expectations, the child whose temperament seems alien within the family dynamic, acquire new meaning when understood as expressions of a sovereign individuality that chose those parents precisely because the resulting frictions would offer growth opportunities for all involved. Seth's teachings also illuminate experiences that material science struggles to adequately explain. Children who report detailed memories of previous lives, accurately describing places they have never visited in their current life, recognizing people they could not know through conventional means. These cases, documented in cultures around the world, make perfect sense within the paradigm where consciousness survives bodily death and returns in new incarnations carrying memories of previous experiences. While most children forget these memories as the process of adjusting to physical life completes, some maintain more lasting access to impressions from previous incarnations. Especially in the early years when identification with the current body has not yet fully solidified. Parents who find their children talking to invisible entities, describing events they could not have witnessed, demonstrating inexplicable knowledge about specific topics, may discover in these peculiarities not signs of a problem, but evidence that the child's consciousness still maintains more fluid connections with dimensions that adults have learned to block. The issue of abortion, a topic laden with emotional intensity and moral controversy, takes on different contours under this light. If the personality chooses to incarnate and can enter the fetus at varying times during gestation, or even only at birth, then the termination of pregnancy does not necessarily destroy a consciousness, but potentially offers the reincarnating personality an opportunity to withdraw from a situation that no longer serves its purposes. Seth does not offer simplistic moral judgments on the subject, but suggests that at a deeper level, all consciousnesses involved, including the potential child, participate in the decisions that affect incarnation. A woman who chooses not to proceed with a pregnancy may be responding, at an unconscious level, to communication from the very consciousness that considered incarnating but decided that the conditions were not appropriate. This does not trivialize the emotional weight of such decisions, but removes layers of guilt by revealing that consciousness cannot be annihilated, only redirected to other incarnational opportunities that better serve its development. Relationships between parents and children, siblings, extended family members, gain an additional dimension when understood as a continuation of connections that span multiple lives. That child with whom the mother feels an inexplicable affinity from the very first moment may be an old soul with whom she shared numerous incarnations in different relational configurations. The sibling whose presence always generated friction may represent a personality with whom unresolved karma exists, issues that the souls consciously chose to work through the forced proximity of the family structure. Seth reveals that families are not formed by genetic accident or geographical coincidence, but through complex agreements between consciousnesses that recognize a mutual need for specific experiences that only that particular configuration of personalities can provide. The most difficult family challenges, parental rejection, sibling rivalry, cycles of conflict that seem insoluble, often represent precisely the situations that the souls involved planned to experience, opportunities for healing, growth, and eventual transcendence of patterns that have persisted through multiple incarnations. This perspective neither justifies abuse nor suggests passive acceptance of destructive situations. The Preserve repeatedly emphasizes that while personalities may choose challenging circumstances as a context for growth, free will remains operative at every moment, and individuals always retain the power to modify situations, set boundaries, and choose new paths when old ones become unbearable. The knowledge that one chose a difficult situation does not oblige anyone to remain in it indefinitely. The lesson may lie precisely in the act of recognizing one's own worth and claiming the right to exist in conditions that honor the fundamental dignity of incarnated consciousness. Children who grow up in toxic environments are not destined to remain victims eternally. Part of their journey may involve precisely the awakening to their own creative power and subsequent liberation from the limiting circumstances they initially chose to experience. The understanding that thoughts and emotions literally construct physical reality moment by moment places tremendous responsibility on each individual, but also offers radical hope. If the body reflects internal states with such exact precision, then genuine psychological transformation must necessarily manifest in corresponding physical changes. Limiting beliefs about one's own capabilities, rigidly held for years, can be dissolved through conscious work, and this dissolution will eventually be reflected in new bodily possibilities. Seth does not suggest that mere superficial positive thinking produces automatic changes. The beliefs that shape physical reality often reside in deep unconscious layers, requiring dedicated exploration to be accessed and modified. But the principle remains: consciousness creates matter, not the opposite. And therefore, transformation of consciousness inevitably results in transformation of material experience. Diseases can be healed not only through external physical intervention, but through the resolution of the psychological conflicts that allowed or created the condition in the first place. Apparently, absolute limitations can reveal themselves to be mental constructs that, once recognized as such, lose their power to restrict. The journey that each consciousness undertakes from the non-physical planes to the moment of birth and beyond represents one of the great cosmic adventures, a journey of extraordinary courage where the infinite chooses to experience itself through the limitations of the finite. Seth reveals that no consciousness is forced to incarnate against its will. Each personality inhabiting a physical body made this decision freely and deliberately, motivated by a desire for growth, a yearning for specific experiences that only the density of matter can provide, or a commitment to contribute something unique to the collective evolution of shared reality. The forgetting that occurs after birth, the amnesia that obscures memory of previous lives, and knowledge of the eternal nature of consciousness does not constitute punishment or a design flaw, but an intentional characteristic of the incarnational system. Without this veil of forgetting, the incarnated personality would maintain constant awareness of its limitless nature, making genuine engagement with the challenges and limitations that define physical experience impossible. Only through temporary forgetting can consciousness fully play the game of material life, emotionally invest itself in the situations it chose to face, and extract maximum value from each earthly experience. But forgetting is never absolute, and Seth points to the moments of awakening that punctuate human experience, instances of sudden recognition where the deepest truth of existence shines through the layers of material conditioning. These can be dramatic mystical experiences where the ego's boundaries temporarily dissolve, revealing the fundamental unity of all consciousness. They can be sudden insights during deep meditation, exceptionally vivid dreams that carry a taste of reality more authentic than common waking, moments of impossible synchronicity where the veil between dimensions thins enough to allow a glimpse of the complex choreography that orchestrates seemingly random events. Encounters with people who awaken an immediate sense of deep recognition, as if souls have known each other for eternities, often signal past life connections, promises kept through centuries, relationships that transcend any single incarnation. The instant and inexplicable attraction that sometimes arises between two beings can reflect not only hormonal chemistry, but a resonance between consciousnesses that planned to meet again in this life to complete chapters of a shared history that extends far beyond the temporal limits of a physical existence. The central teaching that emerges from Seth's materials transcends questions of belief or faith to point to a verifiable truth through direct experience. Each person is literally the creator of their own reality, not a victim of arbitrary external forces, but an active participant in the moment-by-moment construction of the world they experience. This assertion does not deny the existence of real challenges, genuine suffering, difficult circumstances that no one would consciously choose, but it recontextualizes these experiences as part of a much larger tapestry where even seemingly negative events serve evolutionary purposes that only become visible when the personality gains sufficient perspective to see beyond the immediate situation. The child born into poverty is not being punished for failures in previous lives, but maybe choosing to experience material deprivation as a context for developing specific qualities, resilience, compassion, preserve the original language of necessity, or simply to experience that particular facet of the human condition as part of their multidimensional educational curriculum. The individual facing serious illness has not necessarily failed to maintain positive thoughts, but may be working through deep psychological conflicts they chose to confront during this incarnation, using the body as a mirror that clearly reflects issues that would otherwise remain hidden in the shadows of the unconscious. Seth offers a vision that simultaneously honors the radical autonomy of each consciousness and the fundamental interconnectedness of all existences. While each incarnated personality is sovereign, choosing its experiences and creating its individual reality, all consciousnesses participate in a unified field, a cosmic tapestry where each thread influences and is influenced by all others. The actions of an individual ripple through the collective consciousness, altering possibilities for countless others. The thoughts one holds contribute to the psychic atmosphere that everyone breathes. The choice a person makes to confront their fears or succumb to them, to express love or retreat into bitterness, to create beauty or spread destruction, resonates far beyond the apparent limits of their individual life, informing the shared reality that all incarnated consciousnesses continuously co-create. No one is isolated, no one is insignificant. Every choice matters not only for the individual who makes it, but for the whole of which each personality represents a unique and irreplaceable expression. The revelation that the soul experiences a rich journey before birth, carefully planning each incarnation, choosing parents and circumstances, navigating expanded states of consciousness during gestation, then bravely plunging into the density of matter through the shock of birth, this understanding potentially transforms how each person relates to their own existence. Life ceases to be a cosmic accident or an arbitrary test imposed by a capricious deity, revealing itself as a consciously chosen adventure, a precious opportunity to explore dimensions of experience accessible only through physical incarnation. Every challenge faced was anticipated, every significant relationship was arranged, every moment of joy or suffering carries the potential to teach something that consciousness specifically came to learn. This does not transform life into an easy path, nor eliminate the reality of pain, but it imbues even the most difficult experiences with meaning that transcends superficial suffering, revealing purposes that only become clear when viewed from the vaster perspective that the personality will regain upon leaving the physical body and returning to the expanded states of consciousness from which it came. Seth invites each person to awaken to the tremendous power they possess, to recognize themselves as an eternal consciousness temporarily focused in a physical vehicle, an active creator of their own experience rather than a passive recipient of random events. This awakening does not happen through blind belief in dogmas, but through courageous exploration of one's own psyche, honest observation of how thoughts and emotions correlate with subsequent material experiences, a willingness to take responsibility for the reality one is creating instead of blaming external forces for undesirable circumstances. The path involves arduous work of confronting limiting beliefs that reside in unconscious regions of the mind, patterns inherited from family and culture that operate automatically unless they are consciously examined and modified. But the reward of this work is a gradual liberation from limitations that seemed absolute, the discovery of creative capacities immensely greater than those recognized by common consciousness, and eventual reconnection with the expanded consciousness that was never truly lost, but only temporarily forgotten during immersion in physical experience. The great adventure of incarnation continues for each person reading these words, each consciousness navigating the challenges and joys of three-dimensional existence. Seth's teachings do not offer simplistic formulas or promises of instant transformation, but present a map that can guide the journey of self-discovery, a conceptual framework that allows for interpreting experiences through a broader lens that reveals connections and meanings invisible to the conventional materialistic perspective. Each individual remains free to accept, reject, or experiment with these ideas, testing them against their own experience, keeping what resonates as true and discarding what does not serve. The only valid criterion for any spiritual teaching is whether it expands consciousness, increases freedom, deepens compassion, or conversely limits, controls, and diminishes. Seth consistently points to individual autonomy, personal creative power, and the responsibility of each consciousness for its own evolution, principles that liberate rather than imprison, that empower rather than subjugate. May each person recognize within themselves the eternal consciousness that chose this specific life, this particular body, these unique circumstances as a vehicle for experiences that no other combination could provide. May the knowledge of the immortal nature of consciousness not diminish the precious value of each physical moment, but rather intensify the appreciation of this temporary opportunity to experience reality through bodily senses, to touch and be touched, to create and be surprised by others' creations, to love with the intensity that only the awareness of mortality can lend to affection. May the understanding that one chose to be here bring peace in difficult times and renewed gratitude in joyful times. And may each person eventually recall, whether during this life or in the intervals between incarnations, the magnificent truth that Seth patiently articulated through Jane Roberts. You are far vaster than the body you inhabit, infinitely more creative than you ever dared to imagine, eternally safe regardless of any temporary circumstances, and loved beyond measure by the very essence of existence of which you represent a unique, necessary, and absolutely irreplaceable expression. Share in the comments. After learning about these revelations regarding the soul's journey before birth, what impacted you the most? Did anything deeply resonate with experiences you've already had? Has your view of your own life changed in any way? The community awaits your reflections, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these profound mysteries of consciousness and existence that are rarely discussed with such depth. Your presence here is no coincidence. Perhaps it's part of what you planned to learn in this incarnation.